now that we've given Batman his share due, it's time to turn our attention to the one and only Superman.
Yeah. You gotta love that big blue Mary Sue.
He's not a Mary Sue.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. It's Gary Stu, right? Or is it Marty Stu? Harry Stu? No, Larry. Maybe it's Barry.
Remember back in elementary school and they would have those job boards and everybody in the class would be assigned a certain chore? Well, apparently that's how it works in the Justice League, because our adventure starts out with the Man of Steel doing some friendly reconnaissance in the depths of space. I guess the Green Lantern got to feed the Watchtower's guinea pig that month. Anyway, during his expedition, Superman's ship goes kaput. Normally this wouldn't be much of an issue for him, but he knows that if he brings back a broken ship to HQ, then Batman will be there. And Batman will give him that stupid bat smirk, saying, "Oh, it's okay, Clark. Not all of us can be perfect." Kal-El may not be a proud man, but there was no way he would be giving that bat prick the satisfaction. So instead, he goes down to the nearest planet to get it repaired. The name of that planet? Yup, you guessed it. Equestria.
Hold on a moment. Isn't Superman weak against magic?
Yeah.
So, shouldn't he be completely ineffectual in Equestria, since magic is everywhere?
Well, not really. I mean, it's kind of a long explanation, so just read this, alright? Okay, you got it? Good. Unlike his bat pal, Superman finds this place to be rather quaint, seeing the whole pony theme as rather amusing. That is, until he finds out that this world has a slight monster problem. Also, Celestia nicks his ride while he ain't looking, and she won't give it back. But we'll get back to her. Trust me. So with his crew keeping things tight back home, Superman decides to stick around for a while, acquainting himself with the townspeople, learning about them, and helping them with their monster problems. You know, just being a cool dude. But unbeknownst to him, a sinister villain lurks in the shadows, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Once again, this story was brought to us by Onomatopoeia. And once again, I was promised a story that captured the character. So, like last time, let's ask the question, what does that mean? Well, if you would have asked me a few years ago, I would have said, well, he's a goody two-shoes with too many superpowers. The thing is, I didn't grow up with Superman the way I did Batman. Shows like the Superman animated series and the Justice League were on cable, and my dear sweet parents believed that a young boy should read books instead of watching cartoons all day. Yeah, a lot of good that did me. The point is, I was never exposed to the character, and from a distance he seemed like this flat, OP white knight. Boring. But with the DC Cinematic Universe being a thing now, and other things which pop up more than I wish they did, I was forced to take a second look at the guy. And the more that I learn about him, the more that I like. As I said in the previous video, Superman is essentially a god trying to be a man. So, without further ado, let me explain Superman to you. A lot of people like to point out that he's more of an ideal than an actual character, a godlike figure that isn't meant to be relatable at all. But I want you to consider something. Clark Kent grew up in Smallville, Kansas, the most wholesome, down-to-earth town smack dab in the middle of the USA. He grew up on a farm where his two loving parents taught him values such as honesty, hard work, and so on. It may have not always been easy, but his childhood was great, and he grew up with a love of the world and the people in it. But then he learned that he was actually an alien with crazy superpowers, and if anybody found out, he would no doubt be considered a freak. Oi. You see, despite all of his superpowers and crazy origin, Clark Kent is essentially a normal dude with normal ambitions. In the comic, for the man who has everything, Superman is under the influence of a bug that makes him hallucinate his greatest desires. And what were they? Living a normal, drama-free life on Krypton, with a steady job, a loving wife, and an adorable little kid. Yeah, Unrelatable my ass. When people say that Batman is more relatable, what I think they mean is that he's more of the underdog. Being that he's the only guy without superpowers, yeah, of course we're gonna root for him. With that in mind, here's a few traits that define Superman and how they're portrayed in the story. Obviously, Superman has a strong sense of what's right and what's wrong. I mean, there is a reason he's called the Big Blue Boy Scout. He's a stickler for the rules, which is why vigilantes like Batman can cause him to be a little bit mistrustful. In the beginning of our story, Superman comes across a CMC, who, during one of their crusading sessions, set fire to a barn and get trapped inside. Supes gives him a hand, and after an awkward introduction, Applebloom asks him to help rebuild the barn. He accepts, on the condition that the three admit their doings to Applejack and accept any punishment she might give. You know, I find it funny how this adventure begins with Superman saving a few kids and teaching them a lesson about honesty, especially when you compare it to the likes of Spiders and Magic or Dark Knight for Equestria, which start with these crazy action sequences. Instead of highlighting his physical abilities, the author takes time to establish Superman's adherence to ethics and his willingness to lend a hand. This is honestly one of my favorite scenes. Superman thinks highly of humanity. He knows that while it has its flaws, people are capable of great things. I mean, he is the ideal of hope after all.
For too long, we have remained hidden and silent, and have suffered the consequences. It's time to settle this once and for all, by blasting them back to the Stone Age.
I'll have to stop you.
You'd side with them? They're polluting your sky just as they're poisoning my ocean.
They're not all like Luthor. Some are working to solve the problems.
This quality is shown wonderfully, especially with his relationship with the one and only Rainbow Dash. When Superman shows up in town, the little blue Pegasus feels a little defensive. The self-proclaimed fastest flyer in Equestria is usurped by the spandex-wearing do-gooder, and she was not happy one bit. At first I was a little bit weary of this plotline, considering how eerily it reminded me of a certain episode, but over time it started to grow on me. Superman recognizes Rainbow Dash's pride, but also sees someone who's capable of doing a lot of good. So he starts talking to her, letting her accompany him on his little adventures, and discusses what it means to be a hero. The two eventually form a tight bond. It's very reminiscent of Batman's mentorship of Scootaloo, except, in my opinion, it's better paced and a tad bit more believable. Seeing them come together as friends in the end put a little smile on my face. And now for the big one. Superman loves people. Unabashedly. No strings attached. Despite being a superpowered being, he wants nothing more than to be a part of the human race. He sees life as a precious thing, and he goes out of his way to help those in need.
Your doctor really did get held up, Regan. It's never as bad as it seems. You're so much stronger than you think you are. Trust me. Hey. It's okay. It's okay. Everything is going to be all right. Everything is going to be all right.
In the comic book Batman Noel, which is basically a Christmas Carol with Batman, Superman plays the role of the ghost of Christmas present. And it just makes sense. He sees people living their lives and gains an appreciation for them like no one else could. In fact, Batman himself admits that it is a remarkable dichotomy. In many ways, Clark is the most human of us all. Then, he shoots fire from the skies, and it is difficult not to think of him as a god, and how fortunate we all are that it does not occur to him. This trait is shown numerous times through the story, but the best one has to be with the changelings. Queen Chrysalis and the princesses don't get along, but at one point in the story, something terrible happens to the Changeling Queen, and she lashes out in utter despair. Superman stops her, listens to her cries, and immediately offers to help her. Then, something really weird happened. I cried. A little. Not like sobbing or anything, just like a little tear or something, you know what I mean? I'm usually in control of my emotions, but that little scene caught me off guard. Bravo! After that, Superman becomes the middleman, helping the monarchs to negotiate peace. This was a fantastic way to incorporate Superman into Equestria. It feels like something that he would do. And frankly, if this were the only real conflict in the story, I would have been happy. Except that it isn't. Unlike A Dark Night for Equestria, which had a strong overarching plotline, Whenever You Call is mostly a string of loosely connected slice-of-life elements, fight scenes, and other stuff. Speaking of fights, another plotline in this story is that both Sombra and Lex Luthor have it in for Superman. Sombra exploits his weakness to magic, while Lex sends various comic book villains to Equestria, including Brainiac, Black Adam, Sinestro, and Grundy? Really? Is Superman's repertoire of villains so small that he actually needs to loan some from Batman and Green Lantern? Come on, man. As easy as it would have been to make these merely throwaway cameos, the author makes it so that almost every fight has a lasting effect, and teaches us something about the Man of Steel. Superman's fight with Brainiac, for example, ends with a certain popular background character getting axed off, which has a huge domino effect throughout the rest of the narrative. Although, to be honest, the fight with Black Adam did feel a little bit pointless. Although, I guess it was still kinda cool, but whatever. Although, there was one villain in particular that I do want to talk about. The whole idea of this story seems to be, what would happen if the cast of MLP met Superman? How would they react? So already we have the CMC, Rainbow Dash, the Changelings, and then there's Princess Celestia, who is the central antagonist in the story. Yes, that's right. Antagonist. So get this though. In this story, Celestia is under a curse that makes her unreasonably paranoid. Also, when she was young, her father was killed by a Kryptonian. Now, out of fear and anger, she telephones Lex Luthor and teams up with him to kill Superman. Celestia is by far the weakest part of the story. And here are 3 reasons why. Number 1, she's out of character. Yeah, that's right. I'm bringing out the infamous Brony analysis phrase here. Celestia is kind, wise, extremely powerful. She's basically the Superman of My Little Pony. She's got the sun gimmick going on, she's basically immortal, and not to mention, they both get overshadowed by some socially awkward recluse. When I read a story featuring My Little Pony characters, I want the real My Little Pony characters, not some dumb, brainwashed version. 2. The reasons for her villainy are contrived as all get out. Not only is her backstory about her father so poorly explained and glossed over, but it also feels completely out of left field and improbable, much like Trixie's sob story back in the previous review. Also, the idea that she would allow herself to be under mind control feels kinda iffy to me. You've been doing this for over 1,000 years, and you don't have any countermeasures for this? Ugh. 3. She's completely unsympathetic. Because of this stupid spell, she ends up being really stubborn. She never takes responsibility for her actions, she turns a blind eye to all of Superman's good deeds, and she never evolves or grows as a person. She's frustrating. She was a villain that I hated to hate, and every time she was on screen, I would just groan to myself. Lex and Sombra should have been the guys I hated. If I had to rewrite this story, I would have taken the contrived backstory and the mind control and just tossed it. Forget it. The point of this story is seeing what happens when one character meets another. So why not do that? Have Superman meet Celestia. Period. No strings attached. At the very best, we could have had a plotline where two gods discuss what it's like to be big fish in a little pond. A plotline where they could argue about the best way to handle justice. A plotline where Kryptonian and Pony Princess work through their differences and find friendship. At the very worst, they would have met and nothing interesting would have happened. It would have been boring, but at least it wouldn't have been infuriating. Oh, look at me being so negative. Ugh. So, what's the verdict? It's good. Whenever you call on A Dark Knight for Equestria share many of the same strengths and weaknesses. They both strive to showcase the crossover character in the best possible light, but the stories themselves are fairly simplistic and average at best, often hitting some of the same beats. Sometimes it feels like it's the narrative driving the characters, rather than the characters driving the narrative, which can have some unfortunate side effects. That being said, there is a simple pleasure in seeing our heroes just being themselves. As a sucker for the slice of life genre, these tales suit me just fine. So I guess the obvious question is, which one was better? Well, I think that's gonna depend on who's your favorite. However, Whenever You Call has a couple of advantages. It was written later, meaning the writing itself is more tight and focused, and then there's Superman himself. Personally, I feel like he fits into the world of MLP a lot more naturally than his nocturnal counterpart, because there's something that these two share. A complete, utter lack of cynicism. One of the reasons I find this show so charming is the fact that it feels completely genuine. For something that is made to sell toys, it has a surprising amount of love put into it. Now don't get me wrong, I know that Batman has a heart, but it's buried beneath layers of anger, vengeance, and hockey pads, whereas Superman wears his heart on his sleeve. He is not afraid to be vulnerable, and as much as I love crazy, sarcastic characters like Deadpool and Tony Stark, the authenticity Superman brings makes him a sight to behold. Seeing him interact with the residents of Equestria was a pleasant experience, which I never thought I would say about a Superman crossover. So, what's the consensus? Take it away, guys.
That's a wonderful story, Lois.
Thanks, Clark, but I owe it all to Superman.
I guess Superman isn't so bad after all.
Well, I'm glad that you finally...
Batman could still kick his ass, though.
You wish. Batman wouldn't last 5 seconds in a real fight.
I think history would say differently.
Ugh. Hey, Joel. Who would win in a fight? Batman or Superman? Well, Superman's got basically all the powers ever, and Batman's kind of... well, he's got kryptonite, so I guess I'd have to say Goku.
Oh, no, he didn't.